Welcome back to Local 4 Plus Live, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Now, we all know that we just recognized President's Day yesterday, and many people had the day off of work. Schools were closed, financial institutions, the post office, as several of these businesses took the day off to commemorate this important day. So it's very fitting that we are joined by our next guest, who has met 5 living presidents and is here to share with us what he has gleaned from them. How does someone even meet 5 different presidents? I don't know. Clint Arthur is his name, and he joins us now on Local 4 Plus Live. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Hey, I'm really excited to be with you. I love talking about how I met 5 presidents. I actually wrote a whole book about it. It's called Wisdom of the Men, and it's about the presidents and the other international superstars that I've had the great privilege to meet in my life and what I learned from them. This is not about politics at all.
Yes.
Okay, politics is much too dangerous today, and really it's not what I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is wisdom and the smart stuff that these people were able to share with me, or that I was able to learn in the process of meeting them, and that's what the book is about today.
And I think that's what life should be all about. But let's start from the beginning, because you say that your book, The Wisdom of Men, is also a story of how you went from being a taxi driver to working with some of the most extremely influential people in the entire world. Tell us about this journey.
Well, after I graduated from the Wharton Business School, I went home to get the attaboys from my parents. And instead of it being a love fest, they get into the biggest argument of all time. My dad storms out of the house, slams the door, and I'm sitting on the couch with my mom, like I've done a million times in my life. And I don't know what to say to her, you know, Mom, the way he resents you all these years, have you been cheating on Dad?
Wow.
And I'm sitting there thinking, holy cow, where did that question come from? I never even thought that in my whole life. And then I'm thinking, wow, what kind of a rude person asks their mom a question like that? And then I'm thinking, how come she ain't answering the question? And then your real father. Your real father was a doctor at the fertility clinic we went to for 6 years trying to have you, and you look just like him. And I'm like, say what?
Wow.
And the next day was a Monday, and I called up the investment bank on the 87th floor of number 1 World Trade Center. And I said, Vice President of the investment bank, I appreciate the offer, but I decided I don't want to be an investment banker anymore. And I moved out to Hollywood, and I chased the Hollywood dream for 13 years because most people go to Hollywood looking for themselves. Most people go to Hollywood to lose themselves. I went there to find myself, and I found myself becoming a very important and special person. I became the Hollywood Wharton taxi driver, and all my friends were becoming millionaires and billionaires working on Wall Street and in hedge funds, and I was driving a cab making $500 a week, and I did that for over 6 years, and you don't do that for fun. So when I came to be New Year's Eve of the millennium, and I'm behind the wheel of yellow cab number 6087, and I made $513 that night. I go back to my little boat I'm living on, and I pull my money out of my sock where I would stash it so I wouldn't get robbed. And I found crying because I felt like I was 30-something years old and I had thrown away all these years of my life chasing that dream. So I got out of taxi driving and got into selling gourmet food. And it was where I was selling gourmet food that I met the first president. It was George H.W. Bush. I was doing a sales call at the Wynn Resort in Las Vegas. And I'm in the kitchen with the chef, and we're talking, having a conversation, and all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, comes George Bush walking through the kitchen with 2 Secret Service agents in like 2007, 2008. And I go, holy cow, that was the President of the United States. And the chef goes, really? He had no idea. And
Wait, the chef had no idea? Or was he joking with you?
No idea.
Wow.
No, he was a French guy, He could barely speak English. He didn't know who the President of the United States was. So I go running out after the president into the dining room of the brasserie at the Wynn, and I go up to the Secret Service guy, and I go, I have a camera in my pocket. Could I get a picture with the president? And he goes, sure. So I go over to George Bush, and he's very tall. And I said, sir, I voted for you. I did vote for him when he was running with Ronald Reagan, but I didn't vote for him when he was running on his own. But in any case, I said, sir, what's the most important thing you ever done? And he said, Well, young man, that's a very big question, but I'd have to say that you have to keep doing the things you love in this life. And if you look at the picture of me and George Bush, you'll notice on his necktie that he has little parachute jumpers on the necktie. And George Bush was very famous for loving jumping out of airplanes with parachutes. That's what he loved. He did it when he was on his 80th birthday party. He jumped out of an airplane. So, that's him being a leader and saying, look, when you're a leader, the whole world wants from you. They want from you. They want from you. You're a mom. You got kids. You got to drive them to school with their friends in the morning as part of your job as the leader of the family. But you got to take care of you, and you have to keep doing the things that you love, or else you're not going to be an effective leader because you won't feel the fulfillment of getting what you need. So that was a really great lesson from George Bush. And it had nothing to do with politics.
Nothing to do with politics. And here's the interesting thing, because that was my next question. It is kind of the obvious. How did you meet all of these presidents? My question was going to be, did you intentionally put yourself in places where these encounters would occur? Or did you just start getting extremely lucky in life?
Well, like that one was a complete luck, right? That was my first president, and it was complete luck. Some of them I did go after. For example, the next one that I met was Jimmy Carter, and it was during the election of 2016. You remember, or maybe it was 20. Yeah, I think it was 2020 politics. Mayor Pete went and got his picture with Jimmy Carter. Remember that? And I remember thinking to myself, how did Mayor Pete do that? So I looked up Jimmy Carter, and I saw Jimmy Carter was doing Sunday school, and that if you went to the Sunday school, you could get a picture with Jimmy Carter. So my wife and I got on a plane, and we flew to Atlanta, Georgia, and then we rented a car and drove almost 2.5 hours to Plains, Georgia, and we spent like 4 hours in a motel, and then you had to go there in the middle of the night. They said, if you really want to be in the sanctuary and you really want to meet him, you have to come at like 3 o'clock in the morning. So I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning. We got in the rental car and drove over, slept in the parking lot of the church. And the next morning we got to go in and meet Jimmy Carter. And, it was a real adventure. It was like going to a whole nother. Plains, Georgia is a monument to Jimmy Carter. He ran his presidential campaign out of the general store next to the railroad tracks in Plains, Georgia, and it's still there today. So here's the lessons of Jimmy Carter. First of all, he was 90 years old. He was in a walker, body, but still a very strong speaker. And great leaders have to be great speakers. And his message for all of us that day was, look, you may not like the person that you have been in your life. You may not like the leader that you have been in your life. But if you want to be a different person, if you want to be a different leader, you can start being that leader today. You have to just change. And that was the message of Jimmy Carter. It was really powerful and beautiful and spiritual. And that was one, I call that unicorn hunting. Okay, because all of the people, all of the men, and there's women in the book too, like, I've had the privilege to be mentored by Oprah Winfrey, and I met Oprah Winfrey and went after her and learned from her, right? And Martha Stewart is in the book, Hillary Clinton is in the book, Suzanne Summers is in the book, Caitlyn Jenner is in the book. So it's not just men, but most of the met Dr. Oz, Mike Tyson, Eli Manning, Mick Jagger, Evander Holyfield, right? And a lot of them, I would go after them, and I call that being on a unicorn hunt. Like when I went to meet Mick Jagger, I had to go to Europe to meet Mick Jagger, and I said, Sir Mick, what's the most important thing you ever learned? He said, you can't always get what you want, but if you try, sometimes you might find you get what you need.
Right. That's a pretty good impression. I think it's when you have these encounters too, it's about asking the right question when you finally do get in that person's presence too. Like, you're not wasting any time, you're going for it.
A lot of times, especially with presidents of the United States, you don't have a lot of time to talk to them. You have to get what you need. And you can't always get what you want, but you have to get what you need, just like Mick Jagger said. So I ask almost every single person in this book, what's the most important thing you ever learned? Okay. So the next president that I met was Bill Clinton. And it was amazing because he was at my daughter's college graduation. She graduated from USC Film School, and Hillary Clinton's nephew was in her class. So I was there,
Oh.
Bill was there, and I turned to my wife when they made the announcement, we're honored to have Hillary Clinton and President Bill Clinton with us today. Zachary Clinton was their nephew. And I said to my wife, I'm going to get my selfie with Bill Clinton today. So I looked and looked and looked and looked, and finally I saw a head of silver hair belonging to Bill Clinton sitting where else but, of course, in the front row. So after like 2 hours of this graduation ceremony going on, I went down the row to get as close to his chair as I could, and there was an empty seat right on the aisle. I sat down in the empty seat. I got my selfie camera ready, my phone, and like 90 seconds later, Bill Clinton pops up out of his chair and starts walking up the aisle towards me. So I stand up and I get in the aisle, and I'm standing there with my camera ready, and I fall into step next to Bill Clinton walking up the aisle. And I said, "Sir, can I get a photo?" Now, usually I would say to a person, like when I met Anderson Cooper on New Year's Eve, Times Square one year, I went up to him, I said, "Hey, Anderson, can I get a quick selfie?" He said, "Sure." I always use that word, hey. But when I met Bill Clinton, I couldn't say hey. You can only say hey to people who are not really powerful people. When I met Bill Clinton, I said, "Sir, can I get a photo?" Because he had so much personal power. And I'm not sure if you develop that personal power when you're in the office or if you need that personal office. It's probably a combination of both. But what impressed me the most about Bill Clinton was how, without even saying anything, I could feel his power, his real, true power. So that's what I learned about these people. When you have these great responsibilities, I think it brings power out of you, and that's what I felt from Bill Clinton.
That's interesting. Now let me ask you this though.
Donald Trump was
there are a lot of people. I just want to ask you one really question, and this is going to be appropriate since you're about to go into Donald Trump. How were you able to make sure that you learned something from all of these people whose politics you may or may not agree with? And Donald Trump has been a highly controversial individual, President Trump, and so tell us about his story. But I want to know how you put all that aside to say there's still something to learn from this person, whether it's Bill Clinton, because some people feel that way about him, or it's Donald Trump, or so on.
Right, or George Bush, another
or
controversial
George Bush, absolutely,
figure.
absolutely,
or,
all of them.
Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter is pretty much loved. As he got older, I just read he had like the best second act of American politics. But I'm learning people that are smart people. That's what I'm looking for in my life. So, for example, here's what I learned from Donald Trump. Now, what happened with me and Donald Trump was before the election of 2016, it appeared to me that Donald Trump was going to be a continuous media trend. The media was really going to be into Donald Trump. And I was right. And I wrote a book. There was a book out about Steve Jobs, and it was called The Performance Secrets of Steve Jobs. And I woke up in the middle of the night one night, and I had an idea. Donald Trump was making $1 million per speech as a speaker. And I'm a speaker, speaking. And I thought to myself, I would like to analyze the performance secrets of Donald Trump and do a book about that. And 3 weeks later, I had written and published that book on Amazon, and I was appearing on my first interview on CNN to talk about the performance secrets of Donald Trump. 3 weeks later. Now, what I wanted to do was to meet Donald Trump. So I went to a rally with my wife. And after the rally was over, he was going around along the edge of the audience, signing autographs or T-shirts or signs or whatever you wanted him to sign. He was being really just signing anything you wanted, taking pictures. So we couldn't get close enough from where we were, so we went all the way around the back. And when we got on the other side of the arena, there was a VIP section that was empty. All the VIPs had left, and there was a sign on the gate that said VIPs only. So I opened the gate, and my wife and I went in, and we were there standing on the rail, in the VIP section all by ourselves. And Donald Trump comes directly over to my wife. Now she's gorgeous. You know, she's an amazing, sweet person and has a tremendous, generous personality that just flows out of her. Well, he felt it. And over to my wife and says, "This is a gem here. You got to take care of this one. This is a gem." And boom, gives her a big kiss on the cheek. And I said, "Sir, I went to Wharton, sir," because I went to the Wharton Business School, the same as him. And he goes, "That's a good school, Wharton. This is a gem here. You got to take care of this one." And I said, "Can we get a quick selfie, sir?" And he said, "Go ahead." That's exactly the way it happened, okay? So, and that's how we took that picture. And you could see how happy he was. This was before the media turned on him. This was before half the country hated him. At this point, it was like kind of a joke that he was running, but you know, he was just having so much fun. So what did I learn from Donald Trump? Well, first of all, again, if you want to be a great leader, you have to be a great speaker. And for him, when I went on CNN a bunch of times, I called him the entertainer in chief, because for him, it was like putting on a show for people. When he would be a speaker at these rallies, it would be very entertaining. And if you want to lead people, you need to entertain them, because that makes them engaged audience. So that's the first lesson from the second lesson from Donald Trump was, look what he said to me. He said, "This is a gem here. You got to take care of this family, the importance of a spouse." And, you know, he's had several spouses, but throughout everything, family has always been an important thing for Donald Trump. He involves his children in everything that he does. And he really places a lot of importance on family. Family, look how protective he is about Melania and Barron and all of his kids, actually. So, you know, those are the big lessons of Donald Trump, which is take care of your family, be a great speaker, and be an entertaining person. And I got to say, my wife and I both, we just were charmed by him. We both felt like he was like my dad. That's the same feeling we got. Okay. So that's the fourth president. Okay. And then the last one is Joe Biden. Now, here's the interesting thing. My fraternity, I went to an amazing college, the Wharton Business School, and my fraternity was an amazing fraternity. And Joe Biden's son, Beau Biden, the one who died of brain cancer, was one of my fraternity brothers, a few years younger than me. I didn't know Beau Biden in college, but after college, while I was a taxi driver, one of the fraternity brothers who made $100 million, he was the last partner made by Goldman Sachs before they took the company public. So he cashed out $1 gazillion from the public offering of Goldman Sachs. And that's just, you know, that's what all my fraternity brothers were becoming millionaires and billionaires while I was driving a taxi. And I found out about this party that one of them was throwing to raise money for the fraternity at the Four Seasons restaurant on Park Avenue in New York City. And my dad calls me up one day and he says, are you going to go to that party? I said, "Dad, I can't go to that party. I'm a taxi driver." He goes, "You got to go to that party." I'm like, "Dad, I can't go to that party. What if they're doing? You know, what am I going to say? I'm driving a cab and they're all becoming millionaires." And I did not go to that party. And my dad said, "Look, I'll send you a ticket. I'll pay for a hotel. You got to go to that party." "I can't go, Dad." And 10 years later, there was another party. And by that point, I had been interviewed by Brooke Shields on the Today Show. I had become successful. I had done 58 TV appearances. Now this is my 128th television appearance. And I felt like I was successful enough at that point. I wasn't a multi-billionaire like all of my fraternity brothers, but I had achieved a level of success where I could show up at the party 10 years later. And when I showed up at that party, there were Secret Service agents wanding everyone, patting everybody down. I'm like, what's going on? Joe Biden is going to be speaking. He was vice president under Barack Obama at that point. This is like 2014. And after, you know, he was an amazing speaker. He stood up in front of like 300 of us at the Four Seasons restaurant and talked off the cuff for, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes. There's a video of it that I shot the whole video on my iPhone. And when you get Wisdom of the Men, there's a collection of bonus videos that come along with the book, and that video is part of that collection. So you could see the actual speech that Joe Biden did in that at that time. It was like February of 2014, I think. And I was the only person to go up to Joe Biden after his speech and get a selfie with him. Just showed. And what's the lesson of Joe Biden? Then, of course, they whisk him away. He's got to go very quickly. I didn't even have a chance to ask him my question. So what's the lesson of Joe Biden? The lesson of Joe Biden is you got to show up in this life. If you want to be a strong leader, you have to be able to show up. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people, when you stop hearing from people, it's not because they don't like you, it's because they don't like themselves. I didn't go to that party because I didn't like myself. I loved all my fraternity brothers. I was sad I didn't get to see them, but I couldn't show up there because of who I was being. And that's the lesson of Joe Biden. Notice Joe Biden has been showing up. Whatever you think about his politics, let's put the politics aside. You cannot deny the fact that the guy was inaugurated as president of the United States, which is the highest success that any politician can achieve in the world. And he did it, how? Just by continuing to show up year after year after year after year. And this is the real lesson of Joe Biden. You want to win, you want to be successful in this life, you got to show up. And I know it's not always easy, but if you force yourself out of your comfort zone. Look, when I went on the Today Show with Brooke Shields, she said, look, Clint, you talk a lot about being comfortable outside of your comfort zone. And I said, that's right. Life zone ends. And she said, that sounds scary. And I said, when it's scary is when it's great. And a lot of times it is very uncomfortable to go outside of what you want or to show up. It's uncomfortable to show up.
It is. And let me just put a pause button right there, because we're going to go to a news break really quickly, and we're going to come back and we're going to continue our conversation with Clint Arthur after this news break. Get caught up on your morning. Know everything you need to know before you step out of the door in Detroit this morning. We will be right back. We're going to continue our conversation with Clint Arthur, and we were up to Joe Biden. Let's talk about it. Let's finish it up. You said the important thing that he did was continue to show up.
He really did. And it's not easy to show up when you don't like yourself, but that's the real mark of a leader. You know, being a leader is never comfortable, because I heard a great saying one time, where leaders go, there are no maps. And that's the real thing about being a leader. You know, John F. Kennedy. It was President's Day. We'll talk about another great leader, John F. Kennedy. He said, this country will put a man on the surface of the moon and bring him safely back to Earth by the end of this decade. Now, he knew where he was. He was on the Earth. He knew where he wanted to go. He wanted to go to the moon. The piece in the middle of that is the gap. And in that gap is where leadership comes from. And that's never comfortable, because you're going places where there is no map. But, you know, I did a conference at West Point Military Academy with Buzz Aldrin, West Point graduate, second man to walk on the moon, and Lieutenant General Russell Honore, who evacuated New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. And the message of both of those men was very similar. General Honore's message was, all the opportunities are on the other side of impossible. See, impossible is what leaders do. They do the impossible. And when I asked Buzz Aldrin, Buzz, what's the most important thing you ever learned? He said, nothing is impossible. And that's a man who walked on the moon. And that's really what being a leader is all about. Remember, this is the leadership lessons of the 5 presidents and more thrown in. But one of the big leadership lessons is that being a leader is always going to be uncomfortable, because you're doing things very often that are not really doable. You know,
and
like
no one has ever done before, obviously. Like that is, I feel like that's the hallmark of it, is like, and everyone thinks you're crazy, right? Until you do it.
Oh, everyone thinks I'm crazy, all right.
Everyone thinks we're all crazy until we accomplish that goal or make that thing happen that they said could never happen. So tell everyone about how they can get your book, where they can order it, and learn more about you.
Hey, Wisdom of the Men is available on Amazon.com, and it was if you get the hardcover, it's still the official Pulitzer Prize nominating committee evaluation hardcover. So it's a special thing. And you can find out more about the work that I do, the writing seminars or the leadership seminars that I do at Clint.com, Clint with 3T's.com. Why Clint with 3T's, Clint? That's not how you spell your name. Well, I work with a lot of leaders and experts, and one of them was a creator of a science of namology. What does your name mean? And she said to me one time, Clint, I wish you had an extra T on the end of your name because the T's always end up on top, like Trump and Tati.
I'll take it. I love that. I love that. I love that.
So I couldn't get Clint with 2T's.com, but I did get Clint with 3T's.com, and that's the easy way to remember where to.
Excellent, excellent. Clint, thank you so much for joining us this morning and sharing what you've learned. And I think for me, my biggest takeaway is going to be just be open to learn from unexpected places.
Amen to that.
Yes.
I try to learn everywhere I go.
Excellent. Thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right. That was a great conversation. I loved how he was able to talk very objectively, right? About every single person and what he was able to learn from them. And he goes for it, Kari. None of this, oh, excuse me, can I trouble you for a second? My name is Tati. No, he went in. What's the most important thing you ever learned? What's the most important thing you ever learned? Don't wait. And here's the thing, they all answered him.
That's right. So when you go into a place like you're supposed to be there,
that's right.
You get treated as such. That's my takeaway.
That is the definition.
Wherever you are, make sure people know you're supposed to be there, even if you're not.
I love that.
That's hot.
I love that. So let's all go be bold this week, everyone.
That's right.
That's what I have to say.